Hello and welcome to our last equality talk, or at least maybe. If you like this concept, let us know and we'll see what happens. Today's guest is Jenny Brusk. She's a senior lecturer at the University of Skövde and also she's the moderator of Dana. She's going to talk about the importance of female networking and the network Dana. Hello Jenny.
Hello. I had me on mute. I had to find the button. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Can you hear me? I'm fine, thanks. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming. You ready to present?
Yes, I think so. Do you want me to start immediately?
Yeah.
Okay, hang on. I think I'm ready. I just need to share the screen. So can you see my slide?
Yes, thank you. It's perfect.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. So I am Jenny Brusk and I have been invited to this lecture series to talk about the Dana network and other networks for women in games. And thank you again for having me. I thought I'd say something about my background because in many ways it has defined me and why I'm working, why I'm here today. So I work as a teacher and researcher in game development at the University of Skövde. I have spent almost half my life dedicated to games and game development. And when I started as a game programmer in 1996, I was one of the very first female game developers in Sweden. I have worked on titles that were released before most of my students were even born, such as Backpacker 2, The Great Moomin Party, and Wannabe. I'm sure you haven't heard of them. I have a PhD in general linguistics, and I wrote a thesis about game dialogue system design, specifically focusing on how we can create more socially competent game characters. And in 2011, I initiated the Dana Network, which is an organization for gender equality in game culture. And we are, of course, associated with the game development programs in Skövde, where I work. This is roughly what I intend to talk about for the next, 30 to 40 minutes or so. So even though I have been invited to talk about female networks in general, I think it's important to talk about why we need them and what purpose they fill. And I will start by giving you a background, a context, and in that highlight some challenges that we are facing as women within the game culture. And then I will just mention and present some prominent web networks and what their focus is. And the last part will be about Dana, because even though it's a limited network for our students specifically, we have developed some methods and strategies for how to work with gender equality within games that I think could be useful for you, especially if you would like to start your own network or perhaps engage in an existing one. So some background. I will actually start by some hard facts. Women constitute about 21% of the workforce in Sweden as well as worldwide. And this includes administration, H&R, etc. So this is all people working in the games at a game company. My guess is that the amount of female game developers is a bit lower. Probably it could be about 10 to 15%, and it differs, of course, between companies. And also, you probably noticed here that the game developer index from the Swedish game company, they only present a binary division between sex. And this can be compared to the first game developer index from 2004, where the ratio was 15% and 85%. But then you should also know that the number of game developers at that time was about 10% of what we have today. So it has grown like incredibly much over the years. And when we look at the future's prospects, the students, if we look at this year's applications, we can see that 20% of all first-hand applicants were female. And the graph to the left shows what discipline they chose. A majority of them chose graphics, as you can see, and or they chose a program within another art form, such as game writing or music, for example. And within the programming piece, we have included more general purpose programs within game development, which might explain why that is. It looks kind of okay for the distribution, because we know that most women don't choose game programming at their first choice. And these general purpose programs typically have computer science as their major. So this is just to give you a little hint of what the future might look like, or what we expect for the next coming years. But you should also note that more female students actually are admitted to the programs than apply. So in our school, for instance, we had about 30% of the students that were female that were also, admitted to the program for the first year. So these numbers are not like exact. We could also look at the player demography. We don't have that much of statistics over the Swedish or European market, unfortunately. But if we look at, when we talk about Swedish children, we have the Swedish Media Council. They every year release a document called a report called Kids and Media, where they sort of make a survey of all children of how their media use. And as you can see, we have about equal number of girls and boys playing video games when they are from 10 to 12, and then as they grow older, the amount of female players, they decline. And typically too, girls play mostly on their mobiles, according to these statistics, like tablet and smartphone, while boys play on a console or computer. But the report also says that boys, to a much higher degree, have a console or computer on their own, while the girls don't. So accessibility might actually be a factor here. And if we look at the US market, which is represented to the left, it's almost an even distribution between men and women that play games. And that is from the, I don't remember. They make this, from ESA, they make these statistics every year. It's quite interesting to follow, to see how the demography of players look like. But as you can see, of course, that the gender distribution of the players do not really match the industry. And another thing is, what we can see is that they don't play the same games. So it can actually be problematic if girls are not represented in the game development team, when you see that they actually prefer other types of games. And this is also from Kids and Media report, that the boys, they prefer more action games and sport games played on consoles and computers, while the girls prefer non-violent games and games from mobile platforms such as The Sims and Minecraft Heyday. So there are differences according to these statistics. So just to summarize these basic facts, women are a minority when it comes to making games, but not when it comes to playing them, apart from when they grow older, and possibly because they can't find games that they actually enjoy. I don't know. I think it's important to highlight these differences between the consumer groups and the producer group, because game creators tend to make games they would like to play themselves. So most games are actually created by males for a male population of a certain age, which of course is problematic. So what are the challenges when it comes to gender equality within games? I'm sure you have heard of most of them, but I think it's important that we still share them so that we can have a common ground when we talk about these things. I will go through them more in detail afterwards, so I will just list them now. It's gender stereotyping. It's about the attitude towards women in game culture and the resistance to gender equality and diversity in game culture. It's about sexist and violent game content, and as a consequence, the attitude towards games and game culture in society, which in turn affects women's possibilities in games, actually. So here are some of these challenges that we have to address and deal with. But I will not really address game content, and that is for several reasons. It is a big subject, and you probably have read a lot about it in newspapers, in discussions, in forums, in articles. So I don't think it will lead us in the right direction for this topic of female networks. But of course, it's rather a consequence of the other challenges that we're facing, I would say. So the first one is gender stereotyping. And here I have also provided the definition from United Nations Human Rights page. So it's really about assigning roles based on gender. And because we do this, we assign specific roles for girls and boys. Boys are to a higher degree encouraged to pursue a career within IT, engineering, or even game development, because they're assumed to be good at this. And also to be interested in it. When it comes to girls, they are in majority when it comes to nursery educations, humanities studies, culture, and other more sort of soft disciplines. And they're also encouraged to take such routes. I mean, we have had female students whose parents have tried to stop them from advancing a career in games or to apply to our programs. But I have never encountered the male students having this kind of experience. And also the same goes for the games when it comes to the game content, that they typically address the male audience and what they're supposed to like big machines and guns and that kind of stuff. That is also a kind of gender stereotyping. But we also have a challenge in the attitude towards games in society. Some years ago, a Swedish politician said that, I think we're going to need more of homework and less of video games, in particular for the boys. And I really reacted upon that quote, because not only is he sort of blaming video games for boys' bad results in school, he's also addressing boys specifically, telling us that this is something that is a problem for the boys, that they are the ones doing it. So girls are not even part of this equation. And perhaps, of course, there are a lot of things into this that maybe we know that boys play more games than girls do, but it's also when this kind of statement comes, it actually tells us that girls are not included in this. But it also says that games are bad. It's a bad leisure activity that should be restricted. It would be interesting to see if you would ever exchange the word video games for football, for example. I don't think so. And this attitude exists because they tend to confuse content with the medium. Because just because there are bad movies, for example, it doesn't mean that all movies or all films are bad, right? The medium itself is something else from what we express through it. And I think that is also a very important thing to remember when we talk about games and game culture. Another challenge is the attitude towards women in the games culture and the toxic environment many of us has experienced. And in 2012, a question was posted on Twitter. So why are there so few lady creators? And it generated a flood of answers from female game developers with the hashtag #OneReasonWhy, in which they presented their own personal experience from the games industry. And why, of course, this would be also an answer to this question. And a common feeling or recurring feeling among these women were that I don't belong here. they didn't feel that they belong in the games industry. And I've heard that from many women since then too. So this is actually quite common. One reason why was later followed up by one reason to be, in which they instead gave reasons for why they still stayed in the industry, or why they existed as lady creators in the games industry. And in the panel session at GD3 2013, this was the most talked about. I can say that my Facebook wall was completely overtaken by this particular panel from GDC 2013, which was really interesting because it was the first time that it was raising such a big sort of attention within the games industry. It was all over social media, journalists reported about it, and it made a huge impact to the games industry. But also, it might have been something that also created the next explosion, which was Gamergate, which you probably have heard of. It exploded in the fall of 2014 and was allegedly about ethics in journalism and the protection of the gamer identity. And here are some voices in the picture. You can see it's Zoe Quinn, it's Anita Sarkeesian, and in the middle it's Lee Alexander's article about this gamer identity, which was also part of this target. The campaign was really about misogyny. It was based in misogyny, and it was a campaign against feminism in game culture. And it specifically targeted, I will not go into the whole history of this, but it was targeting these women. They were threatened for their lives. They had to leave their homes. I remember that Anita Sarkeesian couldn't do any public attendance appearances without lifeguards, for instance. So this was a really tough time for all women in the games industry. I will come back to that. And the last one, the last backlash, or I don't know if we can call it a backlash, was perhaps rather a response to the general Me Too movement, which was in Sweden called We Don't Play Along, where women in the games industry could also talk about things relating to the Me Too movement that went on worldwide. So this is a background. This is perhaps the reason why networks exist in the first place. And it's important to know what we are working with and what the challenges are for these networks. So now we'll more go into some of these networks. And in this timeline, you can see the birth of some female networks and when they started in relation to these various backlashes I just presented. In 2003, the Gender Institute, which is actually before One Reason Why, I can say that in 2003, there was another discussion around this at GDC, which was also given some attention in Swedish press, and that was actually something that created the motivation for Supermart to start in Gotland. The project directly addressed gender inequality within games, and they arranged game events for young girls, workshops, lectures to inspire girls and women to take place in the game culture. They also raised opinion and demanded more women in the boards at game companies and also in, for example, the jury of the Swedish Game Awards. They said, why should we be judged by men? And Women in Games was founded in 2009 and was then called Women in Games Jobs. It is an international a non-profit organization for gender equality in games, and they work towards the industry, the game culture, game community, against gender discrimination, and it's a huge network. It has about 6,000 members in their LinkedIn groups, and they have annual conferences, and I would say it's probably the most famous female network for women in games. And in 2011, we started Donna as a continuation of Supermart, actually, and with a specific goal to recruit women to our game programs. In the fall of 2013, the Swedish game industry, in collaboration with a research company called Praxicon, invited game companies, journalists, and game communities and educators to form a new organization that should serve as a collective force, as they call it, for diversity in games. And Donna was part of that work. And in October 2014, our platform, which was a web page basically, was launched. And it accidentally coincided with the Gamergate explosion. So our first activity was actually to create a petition for game diversity and against harassment and discrimination in the game culture. And this was supported by most game development companies in Sweden and schools. And so they all supported and signed the petition. So why do we need female networks? Well, it's of course to share experiences, because you probably will have different experiences than your colleagues, and you might have to be able to talk about them, share them, and know what to do. I've met a lot of female game developers who have experienced things that a male game developer never would. For example, being questioned. So why are you here? You're being mistaken for a receptionist, or you're always treated like less knowledgeable, and so on. So these are experiences that are exclusive often for the female workforce. It's also about exchanging knowledge. Many of the networks actually arrange workshops and courses and lectures that you can participate in. It's about providing support in various ways. It can be to help someone to get into the job, to get a job, or something like that, write a recommendation letter or something. But it's also forming a group also makes you empowered. It feels that you are not alone in this, and that you perhaps feel that you can actually make a difference, that you can make changes, and that you can just change your situation in various ways. So socializing is actually a super important part, because this is where you also have these informal meetings that create long-lasting work relationships and also private relationships that can help you in the future. So through these networks, you get a connection into the games industry, you get support, and this can also help you in your career and make you stronger. And here are some examples of rather well-established networks in Sweden, I would say. I have focused on those that explicitly are sort of game-centered, because there are other IT networks as well, like Women in Tech, for instance, is something that is, and Women in IT and AdHer. So there are a lot of networks for, especially for people in computer science and IT. But these are addressing games specifically. So I have divided them into two groups. So the one to the left are networks that offer programming courses and just workshops, programming workshops for women and girls. So we have Tjejkodar, Tjejhack. I'm not sure if Tjejhack is sort of active anymore, but it has been. We have, for instance, had a Tjejhack event, so you can actually create a Tjejhack even though you are not working together with Tjejhack specifically. You have Nerdkollo, Pink Programming. And then to the right, we have more of networks with a specific, perhaps, purpose or cause, specifically targeting gender equality in game culture and also diversity. So we have, for instance, Gender Equality in Game Culture is a Swedish group, En grupp för jämställdhet i spelkulturen, which is a discussion group where you can share, articles, texts, games, and discuss, games from these perspectives. And it also is also addressing diversity issues. The Women in the games industry, the Swedish group, is also it's an exclusive group for people identifying themselves as women, and it is to be able to have a safe environment for sharing experiences and discussions You can use it for job postings and all sorts of things. It's a very open group in that regard. And then, of course, we have DVC, Women in Games, and Dana. Many of these networks overlap and work together, of course. So how can you start a network and why? And I will actually tell you a little about my personal experiences from starting Dana, and also how Dana has developed from there. So we initiated Dana to address one of the goals set out in the university's not their game development plan, they don't have one, but their development plan for the university, and that was to increase the number of female students at the game development programs in Skövde. At that point, we were actually doing worse than other schools. While we had an average of less than 10% of female students, the national average was at least 12%. It was really, really bad. And in real numbers, it corresponds to perhaps 1 to 2 students in each class, except for the graphics program, where we actually had 13 students that fall. In 2013, after we had launched Dana and started to create some events, the number of female students increased nationally, and we increased our share from 9% to 19%, and the national average was 15%. So we had a huge leap up race in that period, which was fantastic. Of course, this had to do with a lot of stuff. I mean, we have already mentioned the one reason why and the one reason to be, and also diversity and all of that. And of course, that generated a lot of attention also in society around games and women in games. So, but I will talk a little about what we were doing and what our strategy has been in Dana. As I've already kind of mentioned, is that we were inspired by the work of Supermarch. I was part of their advisory board, so I had pretty good insight into their work and their activities. And just like them, we chose a holistic approach by considering the whole journey in a person's life career, from before they become a student until they are in the games industry. So we think of it as having 3 interconnected goals. It's about recruitment, retention, and sustainability. And then we form activities to support these goals. So we have activities to recruit more female students to the game educations and inspire women to make a career in game development. And when it comes to retention, it's about how we can keep them. And to do this, we need to provide a welcoming and healthy and safe environment so that they want to stay. For us, it means that we don't want them to drop out of school because they have felt tricked into applying and then left without proper support. So it's super important that we take responsibility for the students that we recruit to our programs. But we must also be able to provide a healthy work life. So given what we've talked about previously, the game industry needs to step up and provide a sustainable work life for our students when they graduate. And the Dana network, we use this network to push this development forward. And what are the methods we use? And we work from very many different angles and approaches, use different approaches. First and foremost, Dana is about student engagement. So students lead and arrange activities mainly for recruitment and retention to reach these goals. And they also represent Dana at expos and conferences, workshops, and what have you. So they are super important. And they are also used as role models for the students that we want to recruit. Just like women working in the games industry are role models for our students. And to increase the recruitment pool, we have to reach out to new target groups. And that means visiting places where we think we can find them. So this includes identifying the target group and then find ways to reach out to them. It's not like we can just go out to school and just, an IT program at a high school and say, okay, so let's just do it the simple way, because we really need to find where are these women that think that games could be their thing. And we participate in activities that aim to raise awareness around gender equality within games and induce change. So we have, for example, attended Almedalsveckan and various conferences to talk about this. And we talk to politicians, and we talk to game companies, and a lot of this is about changing also the attitude towards games in society, because when we talk about games as something that is problematic, it contains violence and sex and it's not for girls, then we will never be able to increase the number of women to the games industry in the end. And we have also implemented some changes to our program in game development and introduced some workshops and seminars specifically addressing gender equality and diversity. And we've also had some collaborations with other organizations working with gender equality within other art forms. We've also arranged workshops for building bridges between game companies, game incubators, and educations, because this transition can be difficult from student to work life. Now we'll show you some pictures from some of our events. So we have attended GDC and talked about Donna there. And we have had Donna Cafe, where we had offered some workshops and like playful activities. And it's the students that arrange these activities and come up with the ideas and everything. We've had game jams, we visit expos, it's from Comic-Con and conferences. We have social events for our students and also panels. We've participated in many panels to discuss these things. So this is just a little short, very brief examples of what we have done. And the last thing I will present is the Donna Day, which is something that we started about 3 years ago. We thought it was important to find a way for students to make the transition into work life easier. And that was about creating a network of mentors and other students. And that is how we came up with Donna Day. So what we do is that we invite female game development students from all higher educations in Sweden, including vocational schools, to meet and have workshops with mentors from the games industry. It's a lunch-to-lunch network event that is more or less free for the participants. We have a small fee just to make sure that they don't just sign up and then don't arrive, because of course it includes a lot of costs for us and our sponsors. It includes a conference pass to Sweden Game Conference, lunch, dinner events, workshops, networking. We've also offered free lodging and also some financial support for those who travels from outside of Skövde. And it's about building this bridge that I was talking about, remove the obstacles in the transition from student to professional life. It's about learning and exchanging knowledge and experiences, forming the network between students, but also between students and game developers. And it's also about getting feedback on your work, so you can show your portfolio and discuss your portfolio with experts. So I think this is a very positive way of working towards gender equality within the games industry, but still using a network like this is very positive and has great outcomes. So to summarize, why do we have these networks? Why do we need them? And to me, it's a lot about creating change to make a difference, because together we are stronger. Together we can make a difference. But it's also in that, of course, that we need support from each other, that we can support each other. We are not alone. When I started in the games industry, I was alone. but we're not alone anymore. There are a lot of women working in the games industry, and we can use each other and learn from each other, inspire each other, and empower each other. And so I think you should all engage in a network and make a difference. Thank you. That was it from me. So if you have any questions, maybe I should, okay. I can also show you, here are my sources. I should probably show them as well. And now I should stop sharing, I guess. Okay, am I right?
Yes, let's see. Oh. Hello. Yes, thank you. That was great. I at least I have some questions. You can also ask questions in the Q&A. Why do you think developers are so feel so targeted? I mean, why? Okay, let me restart. Why do you think women are so targeted in the games industry?
I think it goes back to everything that Gamergate was about. It's about the gamer identity. It's about some players think that their favorite games will be adjusted to support, they will take away something from their games that they love. They also, I think it's also about this identity thing is that you want it to be exclusive somehow. So by excluding women, you can sort of say that this is for us. We have our group, and they are not invited. The girls are not invited. And then I think that it has become also a very macho culture in some at some companies. I'm thinking that maybe we're moving away from that, because most companies actually work with these issues a lot more today, because they don't want it to be it, because they lose half of the market if they can't address women. So it's about money, of course, but it's also about humanity. They want to be good people, of course. So I think this has historical reasons, and it's difficult to really pinpoint like one thing. I think there are many things involved.
Thank you. So if we were to start a network up here in the northern Sweden, how do you think we should start? What is the first thing that we should do?
I think the first thing is to know why you are starting it. What is the goal? What problem kind of are you trying to solve with this network? Because of course you can have a network just to meet and have fun, but I think it's very important to have, okay, this is what we want to achieve, because then you can also start planning for activities and strategies for how you can kind of accomplish that goal. So having a focus is quite important, I think, because that's something to start with. And then you need to know who's the target group. I mean, who is invited to the network, and sort of who is your target that you are trying to, I don't know, address. What are you trying to address? I mean, like in Donna, for instance, we know who can be part of the Donna network in school, but then we also have a target group outside the network where we work towards those who we want to recruit. We work towards the society, game companies, game communities. So even though people are not involved in your network, they can still be important sort of targets for other things. But having a specific goal is important, knowing why you are forming it.
Right. So just a technical question. Do you have members, or do you just have like, you just do things and people come, or?
We do have members.
Yeah.
So every year we try to recruit new students, and I can say that it's different every year. Some years we have a a lot of members, and then the next year they have all quit or something, and then we don't have any members almost. So it's up and down. But we have a team of teachers that are always working with Donna, like a strategic group. And then we work every year trying to recruit more students to the group. And then we have a steering group with the teachers, as well as 3 or 4 students from the Donna group, the Donna student group. And we work, so that is to have some kind of, because at some point we had a lot of members and it was difficult to sort of gather all of them and decide what to do and form strategies. But in a smaller group, you can actually work with strategic work. And then you have the student group who can, they can participate as much as they can and want to. So because students are also doing schoolwork, which means they can't always participate in activities and arrange workshops and all of that. But if you have a larger group, they can, you will always have someone, hopefully, that can be engaged. And then I think another thing about these networks is that you have to know what is your core, where is your heart in it. I know that we have had a lot of requests for doing things, and when you get these requests, you have to know whether it serves your purpose, and then you have to know your purpose in order to decide that. And it makes it easier to actually respond to that kind of request, because you know immediately if it's something that you want to do, if it's good for you, if it's good for the cause, or if it's just something where you get sort of used by someone else. So and of course we use the students, but the students are the ones actually performing all of these activities. So they are super important. I don't know if I sort of forgot about your question and started to talk about something else, but but we do have members. Yes, we do.
That was good. That was fine. So, okay, just a fun question. What kind of games do you play? Which one is your favorite?
I personally, this is so embarrassing because I'm a typical mobile. I love casual games. I've loved casual games since I was like always. So I'm a super nerd on casual games. But if I would play like what other people would call real games, I would play real-time strategy games, and The Sims have been my favorite type of games. I like all kinds of strategic games, like board games or computer games or whatever. The thing is, I get sick from 3D games, like first-person type of, moving around in the 3D world. I get super sick, so I can't play them. I've tried so many times to play first-person shooter games, but I get so sick. It takes like 5 minutes, and then I have to lay down for 2 hours. So I've given it up, and that, of course, excludes a lot of games from the favorite list, right?
Yeah, it sure does. I never thought that could be a problem, but I mean, I have migraines, and I can relate. Yeah. So, yeah. Well, I think that is all. If there's no one here having any questions of the listening people.
Are there anyone?
Yeah, that's a question. Yeah, I wrote so many things here because I was listening to you and I had so many thoughts and ideas. But I think most of my questions you actually answered just by talking about what you talked about. So,
okay,
so
good.
I think, yeah, I don't know what time it is, but I think if you feel like you're done,
Yeah, I'm good. Unless you have any. Well, it's something it seems to be something in the chat.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Really great talk. Yeah, thanks. All right. Well, in that case, don't miss our usual Arctic game talk next week on Wednesday. And hope I'll see you there. This was our last equality talk, as far as we know, but notify us if you liked it. And that's about it. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you. It was
right.
nice. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you too. Bye.